So I can also make golden nether bananas, which don't do me much good. So we're not gonna. Here are 3 grading materials. Hooray! Take that alloy. I'll take this and pop that in there. It's highly likely to give me S grade. Maybe not guaranteed, though. I want at least S grade. Let's pop that in there so we can get like 32 of them. That'll work. And in the meantime, let's make some more refined obsidian. So we will need another of these. That's 2 stacks worth of diamonds. We will crush diamonds. We will enrich some obsidian. And how's my raider doing after that? S grade. Max grade. Ooh. Ew. I like max grade. Max grade is shiny. You walk away and let that do its thing. Combining, please. Double S. I want S plus. Double S or max? I think there's no triple S. I think triple S is max. We've got a lot of S grade stuff here. Oh, I ran out. Okay. Let's make some more, I suppose. Boom. And, how quickly are you growing chorus fruit? Reasonably. Okay, grow me... Cook me 4. We'll save the 1 because I might actually need it for things. I don't think I can do anything with this stuff aside from grading with it, so there we go. We get enough for 8 more tries, and then we'll see if we can regrade things as we grow the fruit. Which means we can grab some bone meal. I have some bone blocks, let's turn that into bone meal. Haha. Okay, and then we can just go cook these 8. More glittery dust. Well, we got 3 max tiers. No, 1 max tier, 3 double S. Start on the lowest tier and work our way up. Our biggest holdup right now is this chorus fruit. I should have grabbed some more while I was down there. I mean, growing it is nice and all, but Definitely should have started collecting more of it. Not the end of the world, though, I suppose. Oh, we're getting a lot of A-grade stuff, I guess. I can make iridium seeds, right? But iridium in and of itself does nothing. I don't know what iridium does, aside from, like, the quest for collect a stack of iridium. Iridium does nothing. Why would they include it? Well, I guess it's an all the ores thing. Oop, that's another max rank. I might be able to make, like, a piece of armor with, like, some crazy scary stats. Maybe. Four chorus fruit makes 8 glittery dust. I'll have to wander around in the nether for a bit. Oh, what am I running out of now? I ran out of emerald shards. That's easy enough to make. Just do that. S grade. We're trying to refine the A grades into something higher. Which is proving to be a little bit difficult. I might switch back down to the tier 2s instead of the tier 3s because the odds for an S plus seem to be fairly consistent in that regard. So I'm going to just put the rest of this away. Not the chorus, actually, sorry. Chorus, please. I actually need that. We're going to do this as the last match. Chorus. Double S. Maybe we'll get lucky. Maybe we'll get lucky and we'll get enough quote-unquote max tier to do something cool with it. That's a double S. We're getting some good outputs, I guess. S grade. Double S. Give me some more maxes, please. Yay, max! Alright, 3 max. One more, and I can make a boots. I can make some max boots, which would be really cool. Like a straight up maxed boots would be cool. Like, super cool. I don't think I'm gonna get more than the 4, if that. I'll put some S grade, if I have any leftover glittery dust, in there and see if I can get double or maxed. Or triple, I guess? I guess there is triple. Well, we'll put any singles in there and use up the glittery dust and see what we can get. Luck in full stuff, I guess? Maybe? If I'm lucky. Oh, see? Another max. If it doesn't grade better than the ingots that are in there, so there's no harm, it will just consume the dust and just leave the ingots alone. Which I think is actually pretty clever. I'd like that. That's actually a big good thing, because now I don't have to worry about, like, oh, well, I've got 19 S-grade refined obsidians. Do I want to risk losing the S-grade just to retry? And the answer is you don't have to worry about it. Alright, give me blueprint book. Can you make me armor pieces? Helmet and boots. Uh, 6.5 with 1.95 magic armor and 5.2 armor toughness. Some nice enchantment valuable with malleable and hard, which I think is better overall than the Crimson Steel. I want to remain fireproof, but I think there's other ways of becoming fireproof. That being said, since I didn't enchant these, I think it might be better to just make these a whole brand new set all on their own, because I know they've got linings and stuff on them. What have you got? Just leather lining? Is that all I did? Yeah, I can just make lining. That's easy. Where's my lining? Because that's all I did with this. Leather. We got a bunch of leathers, so I can just do 1, 2, 3, 4. For the new pieces of armor I'm about to make. Look at that. It's the same thing. Okay, but 4 versus 5.2. And it's, like, way more durable. And I can enchant it. Which I will once I get started on Apotheosis, because I'm absolutely going to start doing that. Okay, so we've got a triple S. Let's put that in my chest plate with the double S's. And then boom, and then boom. And then by comparison. 14 versus 8. Woo-wee! This stuff is tanky! Alright, so that was that. So let's do legs. So all we have left is one more double S, and the rest are just S grade. Okay, since everything else is just S grade, we can also do the helmet at the same time. We're not even going to worry about fussing with this. We still even have 8 more. We just go boop, and boop, and boop, and boop. Even with just S grade, that's still way better. I'm not fireproof anymore, but I don't mind. Sometimes take less damage, occasionally takes less damage. Both of these cancel with brittle, which I don't have on here. Super nice. Can include coating, lining, miscellaneous, and tip, apparently. We can still give these tip upgrades. I didn't understand why I would do a tip upgrade, though. What kind of tip materials can I use? Ooh, actually, amethyst. What does an amethyst tip do? Now that I have amethyst. Didn't when I was originally doing this. Okay, hang on. No. Give me that. Blueprints. Alright, tip upgrade. What does an amethyst tip do? Silky! Really? Silky, you say? Didn't need to enchant it. We can do diamond with, which will have brittle and lustrous. Don't want brittle. What if we do it this way? Still have brittle and lustrous, but it loses silky. Interestingly enough. Because you're 50-50 now, diamond amethyst? How about emerald on there? Can I do more than 2 different types? I cannot. Brittle synergistic. Here gets a synergy bonus if base value is more than 100%. And lustrous, but we gain brittle. How about this? Does that still have brittle? It does. Interesting. How about other silent gems? So we have other things. Gold digger. Silent and gem. We have amolite, which is technically a gem. But does not qualify. How about alexandrite? Nope. Million? No, but we can make alloys with the alloy gem thing. We can make a refabricator and the gem alloy machine. I suppose we could do that. But it looks like I can't make a tip out of most of these vanilla bits. Ooh, I can do Azure Electrum, though. Interesting. Malleable and soft. Reduce harvest speed as the tool is damaged, but cancels with hard. Sometimes takes less damage, but cancels with brittle. Increases armor durability and rarity and durability. Not too bad. How about Azure Electrum? Gives you malleable. That's a lot of durability. Usually gets straight up malleable. Alright. How about Crimson Steel or Crimson Iron? Crimson Iron gives me Fiery. Fire Aspect or Flame to appropriate gear. Increase harvest level to Obsidian. Wait. No, it does not increase your harvest level. I was wondering about that. Nope, never mind. Alright, how about Crimson Steel? Crimson Steel. Am I out of Crimson Steel? I'm out of Crimson Steel. Alright, well, let's make some more Crimson Steel then. Can I make the blocks? No, I can't. Alright, Crimson Iron is easier to do it this way. Alright, Crimson Iron, 2 blaze rods and a cream. Alright, let's just do this much. I don't think I'm going to need that much. That's not all of it, but that's okay. It's better value. I'm curious about what the Crimson... Because it doesn't tell you, right? Well, maybe it does. Hang on. Tip upgrade. Soft and fiery. Well, yes, but it won't tell me what fiery does. It'll increase your harvest level to 2. That's Blaze Gold, though. Whereas, if I do this with you... It gives you Magmatic. Wait, is that the fireproof trigger? I think that might be the fireproof trick. Ooh, is that the fireproof thing? If that's the case, I'll be happy. Can I put a tip upgrade that makes it fireproof? No, that's auto-smelting. Okay. But it does increase your harvest level to Azure Silver, which is pretty cool. I do not want to auto-smelt, though. Not with those tools. What if I make a Tyrian Steel tip? Let me try making Tyrian Steel. Hang on. Tyrian Steel. I can still make Tyrian Steel tip. I just won't repair with it, which is fine, honestly. We go tip upgrade. You get Imperial and Gold Digger, a lot of durability boosting, and some harvest level boosting, which is also kind of nice. Make a tool rod, gets 34. Slows your harvest speed. Alright, let's try a tip upgrade. Also, refined obsidian tip. Is that a thing? It absolutely is. Vulcan. Places obsidian at a high durability cost. I can just straight up use it to make obsidian. That's hilarious. I don't need it, but that's hilarious. Right, refined glowstone, perhaps. Might have a obscure use. Refractive. Okay, not great. Good harvest speed, though. Might consider that. If I wasn't already using an atomic disassembler. What other kind of ingots do I have? And... well, you can't. Looking for a tip upgrade. Iron... Yellorium gives you malleable. Tin, steel, signalium, zinc, lead. These are not... I can't make these into tips. This one I can. Gold I can make into a tip. Gives you malleable and soft. Not great. Enderium I can use as a tool part. Elementium, Electrum, Crimson Steel, Aluminium, Azure Electrum. Yeah, it doesn't look like I can do much with those. Let's make some, let's make Tyrian Steel and see what we can do with that. Because we can give you the Crimson Steel, right? So Tyrian Steel is... I think I have enough to make at least a little bit of Tyrian Steel, but I want to check to see my netherite. Because I want to make seeds from netherite first, so if I did this, I'd have 12 netherite ingots, so that's actually more than enough. So, Tyrian Steel, please make me one batch of Tyrian Steel. Shulker, Shell, Crimson Steel. Shulker, Shell, Crimson Steel, Netherite Scrap, Azure Electrum. I didn't make a lot of Azure Electrum. That's okay. Alright, and then we can crush this. That's shellite dust, not quite what I wanted. I want crushed shell, which is just... oh, combine it with obsidian. Really? Alright. We're just doing one craft, so we're just doing the one. Please do the thing. Boop, oops, wrong thing. Boop, 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 and boop. Makes 4 batch... a singular 4 batch of Tyrian Steel. Which I might use for my armor, depending on how good it is. I have Tyrian Steel ingots! Yay! Alright, can use it for a tip. Imperial and Gold Digger. Increases nugget drops when mining. Increases gem drops when mining. A lot of durability. Not that useful beyond that. Magmatic, malleable. I might do the Azure Electrum just because it's got a bigger overall boost. Azure Electrum seems like the go-to for now for a tip modifier. That being said, how's Netherite? Cannot be a tip. Can only be a coating. Interesting. Can only be a coating. Can't even use it as a plain main kit, but it gets really good if used as a coating. Go figure. When I get netherite, seeds, we're gonna do that. We're absolutely gonna do that. We'll put that away, put this away. We're gonna use Azure Electrum, which means we need to make a bit more. Right? Like that. And we make some Azure Electrum tip. Because they are... it doesn't really matter. 1, 2, 3, 4. And we put that on my armor. This armor. because this makes it malleable 3 and flexible 4. I guess it doesn't really matter. It just gives it more durability. Yeah, that just gives it more durability. I'll take it. Hey, look! They take even longer to break! This is silly. This is so silly. And then we'll give one of them a gold coating. Oh, hang on. Where's my tip? I need my tip. Or did I put it away already? Yeah, I did. Alright, I need to make one coating blueprint. One gold coating. And the reason why we're doing that, singular gold, is because Piglin like! And we don't like soft very much, but I don't think anything is cancelled by soft here, so we're okay with that. So we put it on my helmet. Ta-da! And now Piglin's like. Now, Piglins will generally leave me alone if I ever go back there. Don't know if I will, but, you know, just in case. Alright, let me put that in there. We can reclaim the Crimson Steel, because I might need it. Let me get some Crimson Steel out of that back. Not all of it, but we'll get some of it. I don't mind. We might get some leather back as well. Again, I don't care as much. Now that I have fully replaced my armor, I don't care. I wanted to make sure. I can probably make myself pretty fireproof if I gotta. Okay, now, with that being said, let's make a few things, like a Starlight Charger and a Recrystallizer and a Metal Press. Because I believe the Metal Press... I don't actually know what the Metal Press does, but let's make all these things. Starlight Charger. That requires a block of Blaze Gold? Are you serious? Jeez. Some Polished Blackstone. And we should have everything else we need. There's my Starlight Charger. Okay. Womp. Gains charge when exposed to starlight. So I guess we Starlight Charge. It's the same thing as... I think it's the same thing as this Material Grader. Except for gems. Which... Sure, why not? Metal Press. I should have all the parts needed to make that straight up. I don't know what a Metal Press does because it doesn't specify. I don't know what a Metal Press does, but I made one. Alright, and we needed a Recrystallizer. So we need some more Azure Electrum. There's no alloyer machine recipe for that one, unfortunately. But I have all the bits I needed for that. Well, there's no UI for the Recrystallizer, it just exists. Let me try putting a... Let's try putting a Silent Gem, random gem in it. Here, grab that one. How's about that? Have no idea. Is there anything in this quest that says? No, nothing whatsoever. Alright. I'm going to ask Professor Google, what does a Recrystallizer do? What does the recrystallizer do? I mean, we have it, but what does it do? Locks. Supercharger, okay. There's a block that can enhance silent gear parts. This is an older version, I guess. There must be some kind of multi-block related to it. Is there a manual? Here is the manual. Not implemented and unlikely to happen anytime. Alright, well, I'll make one anyways. Did I not make one? I did not make one. Let's make one anyways and see if there is anything to it. Not implemented, but there is a wiki. Check the wiki, you say. Alright, alright. Open it. Blueprint, gear classes, parts, repairing gear, synergy, grades. E through S, double S, triple S, and max. Greater catalysts. You can re-roll. Adding grades via commands, which we don't care about. That's pretty cool. Starlight Charger, there we go. Much like the Supercharger from Silent Gems, the Starlight Charger can enhance materials substantially by applying the Star-Charged enchantment to them. It also requires a pseudo multi-block structure with 4 pillars, just like the Supercharger, but only cares about the caps of the pillars. Starlight Charger gains energy during the nighttime, but only when exposed to the sky. The stored charge is used when charging a material. The amount of charge used depends on the charge tier, depending on the catalyst and caps. The charge ability is like enchantability. It's a stat. Okay. What does it do, though? 4 pillars must be built around it at the corners of a 7x7 square. The pillars must be 3 blocks high. Only the topmost block matters. The other 2 can be any block you wish. Up to 15 seconds to detect them. Pillar caps can be Crimson Steel, Azure Electrum, or Tyrian Steel. Each one is a different tier. I get it. Okay, that's pretty cool. But what does it do? Supercharging gives vastly improved stats. Okay, and it looks like the Starlight Charger replaced the Supercharger. Okay. Grades. Greater catalyst. Repairing gear, synergy, stats. There's a general list of stats. Which is going into real code-based detail, so I don't particularly care too much about it. That's fine. Interesting. Materials. Aha. Part type, complete data pack. Models, data file. These are all code stuff. Yeah, this is code stuff. Wiki, just here's the info dump, so I can look into that later, I suppose. When something goes wrong, check your logs. Yeah, no kidding. Loot table stuff, recipes and ingredients, stats, gear types, part types, materials, old gear page, even older gear page. Good lord. Answer some common questions. Maybe that'll help. Part, material, stat, trait. Progression, iron, diamonds, obsidian, diamond tipped, enchanting to the nether, crimson iron, crimson steel, blaze gold, netherite. Netherite is considered a coating. Netherite can be applied to silent gear items by using a smithing table similar to vanilla. Netherite is considered a coating. It completely covered the main part of the item, but does not replace it. Coatings usually give a significant stat bonus to whatever they are applied to. Netherite stat modifiers are intended to make netherite-coated diamond items match their vanilla counterparts exactly. Since most of these modifiers are multipliers, items with materials better than diamond will get an even bigger bonus, but unlike vanilla, netherite will also boost the harvest level to 4. Okay, Azure Silver, Azure Electrum is insanely high mining speed but lower durability. Alloy or recrystallizer Interior Steel doesn't exist in the wiki. How to make tools, basic ranged weapons, armor. Can additionally add armor lining for small extra bonuses. Elytra curios. Rings and bracelets can be crafted if installed. The main part, shank, band, etc., can only be crafted from materials in the metal category. The adornment can only be crafted from certain materials using jeweler's tools. Combining them together makes a curio. The adornment is technically optional, but has the most useful traits. Interesting. I did make some. Actually, speaking of, I did make some, but I didn't have a full list of materials when I did them, because I didn't touch the rings, but I did make some bracelets, because we had 2 slots for those. Okay, we gave you Hearty, that was kind of useful at the time. And you're made with Peridot for the Hardy modifier. You're made with the, Heliodor, because you had Mighty, which is strength and haste based on the trait level. It's Mrs. Bimplechip so high. So let me make... I can see if I can replace the adornment with anything cool. I need my jeweler's tools, however. Okay, rose quartz, for example, cannot. So it looks like I can do it at most of the things. Oh, maybe not. I need an adornment blueprint, which might be in here, actually. Okay, I want to make an adornment, for example. Let's assume I want to make an adornment. It requires a bort and any of those gems. All right. Bort. We got lots of bort. Yeah, we got a lot of silent gem stuff to work with here, so let's give this a try. So we got some new stuff like Amolite. It has an adornment with an Amolite modifier, no specialties. Cool, that is super useless. Cure Wither. Removes Wither effect when equipped. Oh, immune to Wither. Cool. How about Ruby? Nothing. Alexandrite. Invisibility at the cost of hunger. Black Diamond Glow Rose. I'm sure there's a way to acquire the glow. Gives speed boost. Iolite. Cure poison. Immune to poison. Okay. Kyanite. Nothing. Moldavite. Nothing. Peridot. Hearty. I had that one already. Rose quartz. Nothing. Could literally just look at the adornment instead of waiting for it. Nothing on any of these. Ooh, turquoise. Leaping, jump boost, and slow falling. Cloaking. Booster. Mighty 4, I already got that. Tool or gear type curio. And gear type or gear type curio. Okay, so I guess it's just automatically giving me that appropriate boost. These are apotheosis, so I'm going to ignore those. Things with silent gear values on them would be cool. Can I make these two adornments? No. I'm tempted to grab Cure Wither. It looks like I can't really do a lot. Bastion provides bonus armor. That might not be too bad. My armor is giving me a buttload of armor right now. Like I've got multiple rows of armor right now, so I don't know if I need it. Doesn't look like there's a lot of adornments that I can really upgrade here. At best, I can replace the compressed iron, so I can replace the malleable bonus, because the malleable is pointless on this. And Mighty doesn't seem to help too much here, since that really only applies to other things. So let's make myself a second Peridot. Because we got two different kinds of Peridots, even. And they both give Hearty. I can even make Peridot Dust, which doesn't seem to do me much good. I can even make Soul Gems. I don't know what that's for, but I can make Soul Gems. Seems to be nothing. Oh god, I can make Peridot Armor. That sounds like a terrible idea, but I could do it. Wow, alright. You can make Peridot into all the things, apparently. Alright, where's my board? We'll make a second Peridot adornment. And cool. And let me grab my gear kit. See if I can remove the adornment from you. Or maybe I just have to swap them out like this. Apparently that's how that works. They're both hearty and malleable. I can make bracelets. So grab me the bracelet. Bracelet! Alright, how many pieces is it? 3? 3, okay. I'm curious about Crimson Steel. Can I do Crimson Steel? And will that give me Flame Ward? I need a full set of armor for that to work. And the damage as item taken, that doesn't matter, because the bracelet's going in my curio slot. It's not going to take any durability damage. What else could I use that would have a nice modifier? Obsidian, maybe? Refined obsidian, perhaps. Has to be in the metal category, I guess. Malleable and hard. Gold? Gives me the brilliant shiny piglin light. Ooh, actually, that's not bad. Actually. Because we don't care about this thing's durability. And theoretically, this qualifies... Theoretically, that qualifies, actually. Because now the piglins will ignore me even if I take the coating off of my armor, which I will do right now. Because you have a gold coating on you, and I don't need it. Tip, miscellaneous lining, grid, coating. Move coating. You can put the gold coating back. We can put the Heliodor part back and put the pressed iron back. We can re-equip this. And that. Which will give me extra hit points. Will this give me additional more hit points? It doesn't seem to be the case. Well, maybe it does. I'm not touching the ring slots only because I have the things, right? And there is no belts from that mod. There are belts from all sorts of other mods, though, so we'll get to that when we get there. I am amused that I can put a surprisingly large, surprisingly substantial satchel in your belt slot, though. This can also go in your belt slot, which is neat. This can also go in your belt slot, which is neat, but I don't have a hotkey for it, which is amusing. And useless because I also don't like the these satchels. They're tiny. They're super tiny. Especially given that you need rock wool to make it in the first place. It's kind of a pain in the butt to make it. Alright, put that away. Put these away. It appears that the gems don't stack, so we can take the compressed iron one off. And let's make a black diamond one. Just immune to wither seems like a better play. Thank you all the same. I like to be immune to wither, that's kind of nice. Look at all of those gems that don't do anything for me. Alright, here's the thing. We have an Elytra, but we only have one. I would like to duplicate that Elytra, but I don't know if I got... I didn't get a dragon scale from the dragon, so I'd have to go kill the dragon. And then I could make the Elytra blueprint. Once I get some more phantom membranes, because I don't have enough of that either. And then we can also make the HDPE refined Elytra for the Elytra unit, which is a thing. But strictly speaking unnecessary, because I already have plates, so I guess I only really need the one for the quest, but I'll sit on that. I think I have every other quest in Silent Tools complete, however, except for these three, so I guess we can make those upgrades. So let's do Spoon upgrade, which is a thing. Requires an advanced upgrade. So we need 3 of those, right? Right, and then we go... One of them is Spoon upgrade. Okay, Spoon. Which I'm not going to use, but Spoon. Oh, I guess they're not all that particular upgrade. What's the Roadmaker upgrade? Oh, that is... Alright. Upgrade. Roadmaker upgrade. Requires a orange dye, apparently. Well, we have all the bits we need for that, so... Orange dye. Okay, Roadmaker, and the last one is the white plate, which requires a block of crimson iron and some crimson iron. Oh, and a crimson steel, excuse me. Still. Done. Quests complete. More gems. Yay! Okay. So the only thing I need now... The only thing I need now from that is the Elytra blueprint, and this entire chapter is complete. I think. hard to tell because green is really hard for me to see. But I think Elytra is the only quest that's not completed yet. I think. So I can make the Elytra blueprint for the quest. It's not a great reward, so I don't particularly worry too much about it. Plus, it's just a side quest list. This is a quest I would like to look into, however. Because we can get started with the various shelves now that I'm there. And we can start upgrading, enchanting my armor. Shelf of Masterful Sight. Enchanting Clues +1. Enchanting Clues +2. Night Vision. Emerald, Netherite, however. Hell Shelf. Can make those. Regular bookshelves plus potions of regen. Ah, second tier. Okay. Doable. Hell Shelf is plus 1.5 up to 22. You're up to 22 as well, but you're more Arcana than you are Quanta. I don't like Quanta, I think. I think Quanta was the variation. I don't want variation. End Shelf is up to 40, but it is Quanta and Arcana. And then there's Draconic. 2 different versions of Draconic End Shelves, apparently, which has just straight Eterna up to 50. And your straight Eterna up to 50 as well. Ah, but you require a dragon head to do. There's a recipe for it. It just takes dragon scales. I'll have to go and kill the dragon a few times, I guess. Melon Shelf. Minus 10 Quanta. Minus a plus 100% Quanta. Oh my god, if I really wanted that. Jeez. Alright. So that's a thing. And then there's the Apotheosis refabrication. It gives you various materials. I don't know how to use it. I think that's the reforging table, right? Uses gem dust and rarity materials to reroll affixes. So I guess you can just make non-affix items into affix items. If I wanted to farm those items. Library of Alexandria. Oh yes, just contain your... yes, okay. We can go down this tier list later, I guess. Kill the things, get heart. I don't think I can make these red heart canisters, because I don't think anything drops these wither bones. It's broken. Which is a shame. Oh, I should check, though. Is there another version? Is there a version update on this pack? Please tell me if there's a version. Oh, right, I added a mod, so... I will just pull it up on the CurseForge webpage and take a look and see if there's a new version. The newest version was released in April. So, no, there is no new version. I'm on the most updated version. That is a shame. Oh well. Okay. Well, since we're clearly not going anywhere with this pack. These mods are rather not helpful. I don't understand what the Vitality Blade is. I guess it increases the chance of heart canisters or hearts from dropping. I don't know what the Soul Amulet is. I could make a heart amulet. However, I can collect all the hearts that I want, but it won't do me any good. Since I can't make the heart canisters without previous tiers of heart canisters, which I can't do until I make a Wither Bone, which I can't do. So this whole quest line is broken, which is a shame. Unless I'm wrong and I haven't gone and farmed enough Withers skeletons yet, I could collect... Do I have a Wither skeleton? I have several Wither skeleton spawners. I'm gonna need skulls anyways, so let's grab all my clocks. I only have one, that's fine. I'm gonna grab a comparator. I'm going to grab some Chorus Fruit. We can disable the AI on those things. That would be great. I'll grab a new lever. Give me some sugar. And we'll see what it takes here. So first of all, boop, boop, boop. We want that, take that, take that, take this. You're actually quite fast. Actually kind of started out quite fast, which is pretty interesting. Alright, and I want lantern. I want a soul lantern. I don't think it matters too much for you, but let's just do it anyways. We'll grab a piece of wool, because you're noisy otherwise. I want blaze rods to shrink you, which means I need quartz as well. Spawn range 1, so you'll spawn right on top of you only. Okay. And then we'll need to get myself some clocks to crunch your on timer all the way down. Then we need to increase your count. So I'll have to take a look at that. You need 13 more clocks. Because 20 is the smallest it gets. Okay, and I want tiers. We only have one tier left? Oh. Alright, how about spider eyes? We have a bunch of spider eyes. Let's do some fermented spider eyes. Gives you lots of spawns at once. Spiderite essence. Sounds juicy. There's my fermented spider eyes. Mushrooms. Oh, that's not it. I want these. Many as you can get. Give me many. I know you cap out at 16, that's fine. We are going to have all of the Wither skeletons. It's going to be great. Redstone control ignores light. No AI, silent. Star. Because I think we can do that. Factory ready! No AI, silent, ignores control, ignores players! Which means it doesn't even need me present. Yay! Okay. Here's the silky. Haha! Alright, let's take you to there. And we'll plop this down somewhere. Let's make room for you. by doing this. Enderman will grab soft blocks, they won't grab cobblestone. Okay, so we've got multiple spawners. Alright, Blaze spawner can go there. Wither skeleton can go there. Enderman can go there. Slap down some levers on these suckers. Slap down some coarse fruits on the Blaze and Enderman ones because they're still brainy. Pop you these. And now you're done. Okay, and that first one's gonna have to wait for it to pop. And then once it does, it gets crazy good. There she goes. Ooh, I'm one-shotting them. Oh, wait, never mind, I'm getting wither bones. Oh, we're good. It's still only spawning one at a time. Very quickly, mind you, but it's only spawning one at a time. There must be other mobs in this nearby region. I appreciate being able to one-shot these things, though. It's good for XP as well. Look at all them bones I'm getting. And heads. Oh, hang on. I've got a looting 4 sword. Why am I using my machete for those? The machete is really strong, but I've got a looting 4 sword. It doesn't one-shot, but that's okay, I suppose. Also, mending is ridiculous. Like, super duper ridiculous. Also, I should reclaim all of my XP that I have been collecting over time. And see if I can boost my hearts via another method, because bobbly heart containers are one thing. We're going to need 10 total of these wither bones, and also this wither skeleton with the thing. So we're just going to keep going until I get my 10 wither bones. Because this sword is absolutely bonkers. Like, look at this thing. The sword is dumb. Eight. Wither skeletons. Oh boy. It's a distressingly small chance to acquire these wither bones, because I had to kill 100 skeletons to get 10. Okay, put you at the top. Put you at the top. I know I activated some new things. Hang on. Oh! And another depth. And home. Put home on the very top. Thank you. Alright, so we have 10 of these. Let's make some wobbly heart containers, shall we? Also, I probably dropped some stuff behind. Alright, let's go back there for a sec. Yeah, I did leave some stuff behind. How about that? Okay. Now we grab, put that away, grab the other backpack, and check to see if they had anything in them. Because I think one of them had something in them. Hey, look at that! Blaze gold! And a jukebox upgrade. Some things in the backpack. I am not complaining. Off! Got XP. Yoink. That was level 31. It just gave me 31 levels just for free. I'll take it. I will just take 31 levels. Oh, speaking of levels... Book of Skills... abilities. Please give me all of my XP back.